Hello. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Ramesh Balsekar, the spiritual master, the sage, one who has realized his true nature and never forgets it. Ramesh was educated in India and then in England, and after that pursued a career as a banker for 30 years. After he retired, about a year later, he met his true guru, Nisargadatta Maharaj, and it was not too long after that that Ramesh received enlightenment. Hello, Ramesh.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you.
Mm-hmm.
And your teacher, Nisargadatta Maharaj,
Yeah.
dealt with Advaita.
Mm-hmm.
What is Advaita?
Advaita really means absence of duality. Dvaita is duality. And Advaita means non-duality, or more accurately, absence of duality. It means, in effect, an unbroken wholeness.
Is Advaita a religion?
Advaita is not a religion. Advaita is the basic principle of most organized religions. But as the religions proliferated into various interpretations, this basic principle of the transcendent philosophy, the perennial philosophy, that got lost, and the religions got involved in a lot of their individual interpretations. So this basic principle, the ground of all being, which is they call it the absolute or unmanifest, which itself manifests into this apparent universe. So the basic principle is that it is the universal principle which manifests itself, and the science, modern science, calls it a self-generated process. So this manifestation of the universe, which the mystic has always said has been a process which has happened by itself, the scientist now confirms that it is a self-generated process. No one brings it about. It has just happened.
Well, what's all the fuss about? I mean, people are seeking enlightenment. People feel like they're in bondage. How does all that come about then?
That came about because the individual started thinking of himself in terms of an individual. Actually, what is an individual? The individual is really nothing but an object. The object precisely like any other object. But an inanimate object has neither life nor sentience. The animal, a sentient being, has sentience. So what distinguishes a sentient being from an inanimate object is the existence of sentience, which enables the senses to work. And the human being is a sentient being with the additional gift of intellect. So the inanimate objects plus sentience is the animal. And the animal with intellect is a human being. And the human being, because of his intellect, has separated himself from the universe and has considered himself a separate individual, a separate entity. And the very fact of his considering himself a separate entity, this very separation is the bondage. So now he has created the bondage, he has created the intellect, has created a concept of bondage, and with the concept of bondage, the concept of liberation comes in. So if the individual does not consider himself in bondage, the question of liberation just doesn't come in.
Does the individual concoct this idea of bondage, or is it somehow built into life, the misconception that we're in bondage?
The misconception that we are in bondage is because of the very concept of a separate individual. Actually, he is just an object. But it is this intellect which has separated him from the rest of the universe. And instead of being merely an object and realizing that it's only an object, an instrument through which totality or God functions, he assumes that he is a subject. The real subject can only be one. All are objects. But he has, the individual human being has usurped the subjectivity of God, or call it the subjectivity. And with this usurpation of subjectivity, he has separated himself. And it is this separation which itself which leads him to all kinds of feelings of misery. The individual thinks he is in misery, and therefore he wants release from this misery, which he calls freedom. So this, he calls his misery, individual misery, as bondage, and wants to save himself from that bondage. So he is seeking means outside to get himself what he thinks liberated. But it is his own separation from the universe as a separate entity, and the real liberation comes with the realization that he cannot be a separate entity, that he is just a part of the unbroken wholeness which is the universe.
So let me see if I understand now. The universe is one, a totality, an unbroken wholeness.
Yes.
And somehow, though, this idea of an individual comes about. How does that work, that the
Yes.
individual comes into this wholeness?
All there is really, this absolute, all there is consciousness. The individual comes in only when there is awareness. There is no individual in deep sleep. It is only when he is awake. That means when there is a sense of presence, when there is this sense of being aware of oneself. And in that awareness, the basic awareness, for instance, when any individual wakes up from sleep, from deep sleep, the first consciousness, the first awareness is not that awareness of an individual. The first awareness is of the impersonal consciousness. So when the impersonal consciousness identifies itself with each individual body-mind organism as an individual, that the me comes up. So basically it is the impersonal consciousness identifies itself with an object, and the me arises.
So the impersonal consciousness brings about this individual, then?
Through identification with each individual organism. That is
Then
correct.
in itself there is no individual.
Individual is a concept.
It's a concept brought about by the impersonal
Consciousness which has identified itself as an individual.
Oh.
So the whole point is that the impersonal consciousness has identified itself with the individual body-mind organism as an individual. And this identification continues through several body-mind organisms. And in a certain body-mind organism, the mind turns inwards. And then the process of disidentification starts. And the end of this process of disidentification is what is termed as enlightenment. So it is the whole process of identification and disidentification is an impersonal process in which the individual is merely an organism through which this impersonal process happens. So the very idea of an individual entity becoming enlightened is fallacious. That is the basic fallacy. And the ultimate enlightenment happens when this basic fallacy is realized, that it is a fallacy. So the realization of the fallacy of the individual is enlightenment.